very pleased to have with us on the show right now Frank Miniter, the executive field editor for American Hunter Magazine, author of several books, and he's got a new piece in Forbes on Fast and Furious. Frank, thank you, sir, for coming on the program tonight.
Hey, Ken, thanks for having me here.
You bet. Now, I said earlier, this may be your piece at Forbes, one of the best timelines. In fact, I'll go ahead and say the best timeline. I've not seen a better one out there. Just going through, when Fast and Furious began, some of the important developments while the operation was going on, and really spelling out just why this is such a big deal and why people, even if you're not a gun owner, if you're not somebody who lives in a border state, why you still should care about this story.
Well, it surprised me, Cam. An editor at Forbes called me and asked me to do it, and that's what they wanted, a timeline, someone to walk through and actually tell the narrative, tell the story. And when you start to do that, of course, your stomach really turns in knots because you see the whole thing for what it really is. But even just going and doing a piece like that where you're digging and walking through, back through the steps of the thing, here I unearthed another fact that I didn't expect to find, is that the new ATF director actually might have known in 2009 because he was on a teleconference, according to official records, on October 26, 2009, with a bunch of other officials, with a total of 13 officials, including the director of the FBI and the former director of the ATF and plenty of others, plenty of U.S. attorneys that discussed this very topic. And now we don't know that they actually discussed Fast and Furious, but this conversation took place a month after we know Fast and Furious. We think Fast and Furious began, based again on official records. Mm-hmm. So it just doesn't seem like it had to come up because it says in this document they were going to discuss Mexican drug cartels and the problems of guns.
Yeah, and that's really interesting, Frank, because when you say that there's no direct reference to this, there are a couple of speeches that President Obama and Attorney General Eric Holder gave in mid-2009, again, where they're talking about these new enforcement efforts along the border, bringing agents in essence describing what sounds like Fast and Furious, but never referring to it by name, which they may not have wanted to do. Again, this was an operation that, frankly, we weren't supposed to know about. So the idea that we would find President Obama or Attorney General Eric Holder or the new acting ATF director referring to Operation Fast and Furious is kind of absurd.
Well, and especially when you look at this whole scandal, and you wonder, how is this staying alive? Why is this continuing to go on? How can I unearth some new fact now? Why isn't anyone else chasing down the story? Why is there still coming out? And, well, it's a clear thing is when you start to lie or start to hide behind an investigation the way the Department of Justice is clearly doing, things start to peter. They start to come out in pieces. To me, it's symbolic of how Watergate went way back in the day, where there was a cover-up, and in the cover-up, as reporters start to dig, stuff starts to come out, and the story stays alive and keeps going. Especially when you have the Mexican Attorney General saying that they're estimating that now these guns have now killed 200 Mexicans.
Yeah, and she says the number could go up. And the latest today, we saw, Frank, the Los Angeles Times and CBS News reporting that one of the guys who was delivering these guns to the cartels was apparently a paid informant for the DEA and the FBI.
Right.
And so there is, Representative Issa, Senator Grassley have both told the Justice Department, look, why on earth did ATF not know about this? They're investigating somebody who is a paid informant for our government, and these law enforcement agencies who supposedly were all working together on Fast and Furious weren't even talking to each other? I mean, they didn't know that a suspect in Fast and Furious was a paid informant for the government?
Well, the two were felons who couldn't have bought a gun, pass the background check in order to do that. So there's speculation. Of course, there's no document to show this, but there's speculation that, the FBI must have been working and said, okay, clear these guys and let them actually walk away with the guns, and there's testimony on that. The whole thing is so dirty, and the ball just keeps rolling. It's really shocking to me. And I'm doing reporting, and I'm calling up. I called the FBI, of course, and I called the Department of Justice. And I was surprised. Most of them just said no comment because of ongoing investigation. But one of the spokespeople for the Department of Justice, if I wasn't such an ethical person, I would put this tape up on YouTube because you would not believe how combative Tracy Smaller, one of their spokespeople, got. He kept saying that it was low-level people that started it. But wait a second, the people that ran the thing in the Phoenix office have now been brought up to Washington and given bigger positions. Are they being, they started the program on their own, they went rogue, and yet they're being congratulated and giving better positions and more money because they started this thing that's gotten people killed and it's become an international scandal? It just doesn't make sense.
No, it doesn't. And I'll be honest with you, Frank, as you and I are talking, the Los Angeles Times has posted a story. This is going to be in tomorrow's edition, so I apologize for springing this on you here, but Richard Serrano reporting that a cache of guns lost in Fast and Furious turned up in El Paso, where it was being stored for shipment to Mexico, according to new internal agency emails and federal court records. 40 guns, along with the magazines and ballistic vests discovered in Texas in January of 2010 during the early stages of the program, meaning that the guns had vanished soon after the program began. So, again, even from the get-go, these purchases were not being watched, they weren't being monitored, and these guns were being allowed to go wherever, whether it was Phoenix, Arizona, whether it was turning up in Tucson, down in Mexico, or now in El Paso, Texas.
Well, it's good to hear more of the guns are taken off the streets. I interviewed a lot of the gun store owners, and they wouldn't go on record, but boy, they're livid. They did not want these guns to go into the hands of criminals. They didn't want to go through this process. They did what law enforcement asked them to do.
Yeah, and and as a result, they were in turn demonized. I mean, you look at the Washington Post ran a big story, "The Secret Life of Guns" or "The Hidden Life of Guns," in which they talked about some of these gun stores that were working with the ATF, cooperating with the ATF, and yet these stores were portrayed as the number one sources for firearms turning up in the hands of cartel members.
And when you talk to the ATF whistleblowers, they say, look, these guys were our friends. They're working with us. They're helping us. And now we've hung them out to dry. They understand that if they can't work with those gun store owners, if that becomes more friction and they're more afraid, then it's going to get more difficult for them to bust the lawbreakers.
Yeah, absolutely. So we know we're going to have at least 2 more hearings on this, Frank. Wayne LaPierre has called for a special prosecutor. Representative Issa has said that he thinks one is needed. We talked with Congressman Ted Poe a couple of weeks ago. He agreed as well. What's your take on where this scandal goes from here?
Well, there's still testimony. We don't have all of the former ATF directors' testimony yet. Issa hasn't released it. The Justice Department just released some of the tapes that one of the gun store owners had. And that actually got the Congress fairly angry because they wanted, to keep investigating. But Justice Department. So there's back and forth on these kinds of things. It's going to depend on some records. If some more of the truth comes out. Being that no one has fallen yet, no one has gotten fired or whatever. No one's getting scapegoated on this thing yet. Obviously, it goes higher and higher. So it's going to depend on whether new records come out that can implicate higher up the chain.
All right. Well, listen, Frank, glad you could be with us on the program, sir. Thank you so much, and look forward to talking to you again very soon.
All right, Cam.